A hidden cave in Vietnam, once used as a wartime hospital, carved entirely by hand. A giant temple in India carved from the top down with 200,000 tons of rock removed using nothing but chisels. And an ancient mountain temple made from a single slab of stone, perfectly symmetrical and for some mysterious reason left unfinished. These are temples built into mountains with no known tools. First up, we have Huyền Concave Pagoda in Vietnam. No, this is not the set of an Indiana Jones movie. This is a real place. It's carved right into the marble mountains near Da Nang, and when you walk inside, you're standing in this dark, echoey cave with a huge Buddha statue lit by a beam of sunlight coming down through a hole in the ceiling. It looks intentional, but it's natural. It's just how the rock split over time. The cave's been used for all kinds of things over the centuries. Originally, the Cham people were here, so you'll see a mix of Hindu and Buddhist stuff. Later on, Vietnamese monks added statues, incense holders, and altars, but during the Vietnam War, the whole place was used as a Viet Cong hospital. There are still holes in the walls from shrapnel, and parts of the cave were widened by hand so wounded soldiers could be carried in. There's no sign that any big machinery was ever used here. The stairs and carvings were shaped straight into the stone with simple tools. No concrete, no reinforcement, they just worked with what the mountain gave them. And somehow they turned it into this incredible place that I am absolutely adding to my ever-growing list of places I really want to see with my own eyes. This is Kailasa Temple, the largest Hindu temple in the Ellora caves in India. This temple wasn't built, it was carved. Instead of stacking stone or building walls, they started at the top of a mountain and chiseled their way down, turning a solid chunk of rock into what you see here. It was made in the 8th century, and around 200,000 tons of rock had to be removed. They dug out courtyards, tunnels, columns, shrines, statues, all from the inside out. And they did it using nothing more than iron chisels and other basic hand tools. There are elephant statues at the base that look like they're holding up the structure. The inside has carvings from Hindu epics, perfectly straight pillars, staircases, and huge open spaces with crazy high ceilings. There are even parts that look like they were built with individual pieces, but they weren't. It's all the same mountain. No one really knows how long it took. Some say 20 years with thousands of workers, but even that seems way too fast for something this intricate. And just imagine if they messed up one section, they couldn't fix it. So this would have taken an incredible amount of skill. Even today, people have no clue how they pulled it off with the limited tools they had. These are the Masrur temples, sitting on a rocky hill in northern India. They were carved right into the mountains sometime in the 8th century, and the whole place is made of a single piece of stone. That means no bricks, no stacked stones. Everything you see was chiseled out of one giant rock. The design follows something called the Nagara style, which is just a traditional northern Indian way of laying out temples. The central part is usually tall and shaped like a tower, and the temple is supposed to mirror the universe, so it's all super symmetrical and symbolic. Even the little details, like where the pond goes, has meaning. There's a man-made pond right in front of it that reflects the whole thing like a mirror when it rains. It's really pretty, but it looks unfinished as well. There are parts where the carving just stops, like they walked off the job mid-project. Nobody really knows why. Could have been abandoned because of an earthquake or maybe a war. Some carvings are really detailed, others look like they barely started. No sign of advanced tools here either, just basic hand chisels. Lalibela, Ethiopia has some of the most mind-blowing ancient architecture on the planet. There are 11 churches there that were carved straight into the ground. Workers carved down into solid volcanic rock to make these things, and they were made in the 12th and 13th centuries under a king named Lalibela, who wanted to create a new holy city so people wouldn't have to travel all the way to Jerusalem. The most famous of the churches is the Church of St. George, which was dug into the ground and shaped like a perfect cross. From the surface, it looks like the top of a regular building, but when you walk up, you realize the entire church is down inside a giant pit. They didn't just carve the outsides, they carved rooms, columns, doors, windows, altars, and there are tunnels connecting the churches, all from the same rock. And they did this with primitive tools. They didn't use explosives, there were no big machines, people just chipped away at it for decades. And yes, these churches are still in use today. People still go there to pray, and during major religious holidays, thousands of people make pilgrimages, some walking barefoot for days to get there. Let's switch to Japan. Ōminesan-ji Temple sits near the top of Mount Omine. It was first built in the late 600s, and it's still part of a religious path that monks and pilgrims hike every year. The main hall is set into the side of the mountain itself, not just next to it, actually into the rock. The religion tied to this place is called Shugendo. It's a mix of old Buddhist and Shinto beliefs, and the whole idea is to go through harsh mountain training to reach spiritual power. So getting to this temple is not easy. It's a challenge, physically and mentally. The current building was rebuilt in the 1600s, but it's still based on the original design, and the location hasn't changed. There's not a lot of info about how the first version was carved into the rock or who exactly did it, and because it's so high up and isolated, it doesn't seem like the kind of place you'd build unless it was seriously important. One thing worth mentioning for all the women in the audience, it is still banned for you to go to the temple. It's part of an old rule that dates back over 1,000 years, and it's still enforced today. So not only is this place very old, it still adheres to rules written in a very different time. This is the Bindeshwar Mahadev Temple, also called Bindeshwar Temple. It's way up in the mountains of northern India, around 8,200 feet above sea level. It's dedicated to Shiva, but no one really knows who built it or when exactly it was made. Some people say it goes back to the 9th or 10th centuries, others think it's even older. The whole thing is carved out of stone, and there's no sign of any complex tools or equipment having been used. There are no detailed records either, no construction plans, it just sort of exists out in the forest. The inside still has stone idols of Shiva and other deities, and locals still use it for festivals and religious events. Once a year there's a festival where people bring lamps and offerings. It's also in a remote spot, surrounded by thick forest and barely marked, so it doesn't get a lot of tourists. It was actually torn down and rebuilt in 2017, but they tried to stay true to the original layout. Still, nobody really knows how the original was built in the first place or why it was built so far from everything. This is Ōminesan. It's one of the oldest temples ever found in Cambodia. It was built sometime in the 700s near what would later become Angkor, the area famous for Angkor Wat. Long before that empire showed up, Ōminesan was already experimenting with what's called a temple mountain layout, basically a pyramid-shaped temple meant to represent a sacred mountain. What makes it even more interesting is that part of it was actually carved into a natural hill, and underneath there's this underground chamber. That's not something you see at other temples in the region. Most just sit flat on the ground, but this one was built into the earth. No one really knows what the chamber was used for, but it's completely unique. Over time, the temple got buried under layers of earth, and parts of it were covered up completely when a giant man-made reservoir was built nearby hundreds of years later. This is a Taoist temple called Tiejia Temple, sitting about halfway up Mount Taibai in central China. The current version of the temple was rebuilt in modern times, but the original version has been around in some form since at least the Han Dynasty, which was over 1,500 years ago. But strange is where it was built, right into the mountainside, around 5,000 feet above sea level. Pilgrims used to hike the mountain and stop here to rest and pray before heading higher. The mountain itself is considered sacred. The mountain itself is also considered sacred, and this spot marks a kind of spiritual checkpoint along the way. There's no clear record of how the original version was built into the rock. There are steps carved straight into the mountain and parts of the old foundation that suggest they cut directly into the stone. Whoever built it had to carry everything by hand up steep, dangerous terrain too. This one's a more recent discovery. Palaspata is a 1,000-year-old stone temple built by the Tiwanaku civilization high up in the Andes near Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. Archaeologists found it not that long ago using drones and satellite scans. It had been sitting unnoticed on a mountain ridge about 13,000 feet above sea level. It's a solid example of how much we still don't know about these ancient cultures. The temple is made up of about 15 rooms. And what's interesting is where it's located, right where 3 different regions came together: mountain highlands, grazing land, and farming valleys. So it's probably used for trade. They also think it was used for rituals tied to the sun and the farming seasons, but obviously at some point the place was abandoned and forgotten, and it sat there for centuries, slowly getting buried and overgrown, until we finally spotted it from the air, of course. Mesa Verde, Colorado is home to some of the most impressive rock-cut buildings in the United States, and Cliff Palace is the biggest of the bunch. It was built by the ancestral Puebloans around 800 years ago, right into the side of a massive cliff. They didn't have metal tools, they didn't use wheels, they still managed to carve this out. There are about 150 rooms, along with a bunch of ceremonial chambers called kivas. The location is just crazy. The whole thing sits under a huge overhang, so it's protected from wind, rain, and snow. You can still see carved steps and handholds on the rock walls where people used to climb in and out. Some of the rooms are stacked up to 4 stories high, with small windows, storage areas, and fire pits inside. Everything was built using stone hammers, shaped sandstone, and mud mortar. This was the home of an entire community, though, carved right into a cliff with nothing but basic tools, and it's still standing. I've been your host, James. I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.